Something that I say along the way will touch you. I know it. Let's begin that process of crafting a meaningful life.
Here's Mary Crafts.
Good morning and welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. Aren't you excited now that you're on the path? For over 300 episodes, we have been finding the path to crafting a meaningful life. I'm Mary Crafts, and every single week I'm delighted to be with you because I'm in the process and you're in the process. And the great news is it doesn't matter how long we live on this planet, we're still in the process. Sometimes I'm at the gym and I might turn to John and say, when do you think I get to stop coming here? And working my tail off. And he says the same thing to me. You know, the day you die, that's when you get to stop coming to the gym and giving your all. I'm like, okay, I got it. So to my listeners, I want you to be really excited about who's on my podcast with me today. And this guy's name is John Moore. John, welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. And by the way, 300 episodes, you have been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
And congratulations. Like, that is a big deal.
I think
I just can't fathom more than 300 episodes.
Yeah, me either.
It's amazing.
And my producer, Drew, of course, still with me after all this time. You don't think he'd kicked me out, but
good for you. And thank you for having me.
I'm so happy, and you can see how committed I am to bringing my listeners good content. So I wanted to tell people about how we happened to meet, which was just 5 days ago. I think that's crazy that I asked you to be on my podcast after knowing you only an hour, and I turned to you. Do you want to be on my podcast?
I know that was flattering. You know, I thought, I guess I didn't mess it up too bad.
No, you were so impressive. You know, when I walked into that room that day, both John and I were at a symposium for teenage suicide put on by Brandy Vega and her organization called Promise to Live. And Brandy's been on my podcast before, and we've talked about her personal journey with that, with her daughter, and she felt this calling to make a difference. When you look at those stats of 71% increase in teenage suicide since 2010, the advent of social media. Both, I think you and I are dumbfounded by that stat. Anyway, she put on this at Silicon Slopes, and there were 6 panelists that got to speak for 5-10 minutes. I'm sure I took my full 10, and that someone else may have only taken 5. And then there was a Q&A at the end, and it was so powerful. But John, when I walked in there that day, it's always that moment when I have to step back and think, okay, you're the oldest person in this room. And even though you may think you have a lot to say, really, to that tech group, I'm a has-been. And so you just kind of have to gear up and say, I know what I have here, and go for it. So I went right before you, and I got to do my spiel, and I sat down, and you got up and went. And as I was sitting behind you, I just want you to picture this. I was almost directly behind the podium. And I got to see this guy standing there in this brown corduroy jacket, less than half my age. And I'm trying to think how to describe it, John. It was like I felt this immense love coming from you. You were just like kind of radiating. Even now, I can feel it. I felt that day. Wow. And I'm like, who is this guy? And how did he get here at this age? What has been his path? And you proceeded to talk then about this group you've connected with, or that you created, the Brotherhood, and you talked about that. And I'm like, I want everyone to hear about this. I am 85% women listeners. But those 15% of my guys that come back every week are going to love this. And all those 85% of the women are going to run to tell their people about this. So
Exactly.
let's start with who you are and where you came from,
Yes.
and then about the
Yes.
Brotherhood.
Yes, please. Well, and thank you for that nice introduction. I hope that's a lot to follow.
Mm.
And I don't know how much of it is true, but I appreciate that
Excuse
you
me?
see it that way. Well, that it's true that you see me that way. Like, it's so funny what you said about walking into that room. I feel like I go in and I'm like, I'm just a baby. Like, who
Ah,
are these people to listen to me, you know? So it's just kind of a funny how we all approach it. And so I appreciate those kind words. I really do. And I felt very inspired after you spoke. So
mm.
so anyway, well, let me give you a brief introduction just about who I am, where I came from, and then we'll get into the good stuff, right? So I grew up in Littleton, Colorado, just south of
Oh,
Denver.
sure.
Youngest of 9 kids,
Whoa.
and yeah, it was a blast. I love my family so much. Big part of who I am. So grew up in that family. Ended up serving a mission in Argentina. I went to BYU, Idaho, and I
So,
met my
for
wife
those of
there.
you who are not LDS, a member of
Yes.
the Mormon Church, John served a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter Day Saints mission, where they spend 2 years of their life and they go to all over the world, really, foreign countries
Yeah.
in the United States, and they serve for 2 years teaching about the gospel of Jesus Christ. And you did that in
Yep.
Argentina.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. Yep.
So what a beautiful
And got
experience
to
for you.
Oh, it was life changing. It really was in so many ways. I could talk about it all day. So I come home from my mission. I have this transformative experience, and then I go to BYU, Idaho, and I meet my wife there. Who, funny enough, my sister and her sister were companions as missionaries together in Virginia a few years prior,
Oh,
and
wow.
so we kind of made that link up and ended up having this courtship and ended up getting married later that year. And so
Hmm.
from there, we now have 5 kids.
You have 5 kids.
I have 5 kids. They just keep showing up. It shocks me every day. I
Okay.
keep thinking when
I just got
I
back from
keep wondering where
Africa.
they come from.
And I tell you, in
Wow.
Africa, women were asking me, where do these babies come from? Like, how do I get pregnant? I mean, they literally did not know.
Wow.
And so for you to say that, I'm like, okay, I know other people like that.
I mean, obviously, I'm kidding on most of
Right.
them. Some of them, we really do wonder how they showed up, but we're grateful. We love every single one of them. They're crazy. They're nuts. We've got a girl who leads the pack, and then
Uh,
4 boys, ranging from, well, this week they turned from 9 years old to newborn. So that's a little
wow.
bit about me. I come from a communications, advertising, graphic design, marketing background.
Okay.
So social media strategy, graphic design, all that. So I have a background in creative direction, and that's where I was for a while. Beginning of last year, I ended up leaving my full-time job and starting a mural and graphic and
Ah,
branding business. So
okay.
kind of two random things, but it's a design company, and we did murals and we do identities, design identity, brand identities, like logos and all that stuff, to build world-class brands. So I've been doing
Mm.
that for a while until the beginning of this year when I met somebody named Justin Bray, who is now my business partner. We went to lunch and we talked about this idea that I had been playing with for actually a couple of years. One that I had become very passionate about, which was men's mental health, and just
Mm.
just this whole idea of men's work, of building brotherhood, building bonds, redefining masculinity, or I guess restoring masculinity, from where it is currently in the cultural conversation, and just this whole idea around mental health for men and the stigmas that
Yeah.
that I experienced
Yeah.
as a man, and feeling like I was broken and messed up because I had feelings and because I was struggling, and so a lot of that fueled this idea that I had to build this brotherhood, but one that was accessible. Because a lot of times we see
Mhm.
brotherhoods on social media and these men's groups, and they're wonderful and amazing. But a lot of times we see they're not as inclusive as they should be, or not accessible. So there's a lot of men that or a lot of these great groups, but you have to pay $5,000 every couple months, or for a
Yeah.
retreat it's $1,500, and they deserve that. Like they deserve to charge that much, and they create a lot of value. But what about people like me or some of my neighbors who are teachers, or some of my, you know, we can't afford, not a lot of people can afford those kinds of things. And so we decided to
Mm.
build something that was affordable, and that men could come to and have these safe spaces to be able to express how they're feeling, to gain support, but also to grow together. So that's currently what I'm in,
Mm.
is building this. We built this platform. It's called Heare Brotherhood. That's the app name. But we also do retreats. We have apparel. We do a few different things.
So here, like HEAR.
So it's Heare. So
Oh,
let me
okay.
give you a little background behind why. Um, we like the idea of like here, HERE, like here. I am present
Uh huh.
here. But then we like the idea of like hearing, like HEAR. Um,
Mm.
and so those are two different spellings, but we thought, oh, they both are like the two pillars of what we're trying to do. We want to teach presence and how to be present in the moment, but also like being here alive, and so there's a little bit of suicide prevention in there, of people enjoying life and being here. But it's also like, I'm here to hear. And so it's this idea of being there for your brother. I am my brother's keeper. I am here shoulder to shoulder with you, brother. Let's take this on together, kind of an attitude.
Wow.
And so we launched in May 1st. My
So
partner Justin
this
Bray.
is December. So about 9 months ago, 8 months ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, so yeah, so I met Justin in January of this year.
So about a year ago.
We had
Yeah.
worked, we worked on it a little bit. I can't believe it's almost been a year ago. It feels like, anyway, it's been a crazy year. So we met, and then we met our other partner, Mike Allen, who's been a critical part of this thing.
Hmm.
A few months later, he became a co-founder with us. May 1st, we launched. We did it with a concert in the park, and like 40 pizzas. It was way too many pizzas. And we did a concert. We did just a program, and hundreds of more than 100 people showed up, and it was so beautiful. Um, and since then, we've done more than 45 events, half virtual, half in person, and we've done retreats. We've dropped 3 apparel collections, and we've been able to build this app where men can come on and have a safe place to share. And that's the idea of it, is uh, what stays in this app, what happens in this app stays in this app. Like, the conversations are safe here. You don't have to worry about somebody going out and putting it on blast on LinkedIn or Instagram and things like
Yeah.
that, because we have rules to protect that. So we saw this need for men to have a place, to know that they can be seen and heard and loved without their man card being clipped, or without their whatever, having
Yeah.
to worry about their masculinity being in check. Because we believe that, I believe so strongly, that the true sign of a strong man is one that is able to express himself and to have control of his emotions and celebrate the emotions. That's where true strength is. It's easy to get angry, and it's easy to lash out at somebody. It's easy to push our feelings down, because then we don't have to face them. What's actually difficult and requires strength is facing them
Wow.
and dealing with them.
So this had
So
such an impact on me as you were talking about this, because I think about myself as a woman. First, in the first part of people's lives, they usually feel very isolated. They feel like I'm the only one who's feeling this.
right.
Um, I'm such a loser. I'm never going to be enough. Every time I
Yep.
turn around, I'm afraid to step forward. But then, as women, as we grow into our 40s and 50s, we begin to realize, "Oh, wait a minute, there are other women who feel this way." And we have a lot of groups, online chats, retreats, just group chats on our cell phone, where we begin to say,
Sure.
"Oh, yeah, that's just how I am," and blah, and you have this sisterhood, this connection, because there's a little bit more willingness, I believe, in women to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But it struck
It's much
me,
more innate
it
with
it
women.
is. But what struck me was after this was all over, and John and I, of course, had a great conversation as we drove home. And John was there with me at the symposium the other day. And John's 72, so he's a little older than I am, but not a lot, as he points out. 2 years, like, what is 2 years? And I'm like, man. But
I mean, it's just a little few.
yeah, just a blink of the eye.
Just
But
a few.
he said, that guy. I go, John, because I was already had asked you to be on my podcast. He said, yeah, that's quite the thing he has. And I'm like, yeah, it is. And he said, when I was growing up, or, he worked for Wells Fargo most of his life. And he said, in the banking industry, we never would have talked about those kinds of things. And he's an athlete. So he was always like getting the most out of sports and being the big He-Man things. We couldn't have that. We wouldn't have even allowed ourselves to step into that
Right.
space. And then he went on to say, I think, which is the critical piece. He said, but it's why now, at this age, you and I have the relationship we have because we can be vulnerable with each other. And we know each other is not perfect. And we can be safe spaced. And the fact that you're providing that for men at a much younger age and giving them a platform to say, you know what? I have a lot of fears, and this is my biggest one right now. And the value of
Yeah.
that, John, you have to know how huge that is.
Well, thank you. And what's interesting about what you just said is, we get this has been shocking to me. The reception that we have received
Mm.
has been amazing, but especially from the generation that you're talking about that grew up maybe
Yeah,
with fathers that were, came
closed.
home from the
Yeah,
war, or their fathers didn't teach them emotional
right.
vulnerability or emotional intimacy. And it's not, and that's not a dig on them. It's just the way that it
Yeah,
was. And I'm grateful. I grew up in a home where my father was very, he hugged us, he kissed us, um, he wasn't afraid to share certain things, right? And I'm so grateful for that, um,
mm.
because it set me up, hopefully, to be able to share that with other men who didn't have that from another man growing up, or from their friends. But what I was going to say is, what has shocked me the most is the group that has received this the most, which is, we get a lot of 40, 50 somethings on our app, and they're sometimes the most active
Yeah,
because society didn't provide this for them necessarily, um, for them their whole lives. And we have a guy who, he just turned 60. He's like one of the greatest human beings on the planet. I love him to death. And he has talked about how his whole life he has felt inferior. He has felt all these things because of who he is. And he said, I have finally found my tribe. And he's 60 years old.
I love
And
that.
after all that time, he's like, I finally found a place where I can be who I am without judgment and without worrying about X, Y, and Z. And that for me is the greatest testament that this is needed. And even with my partners, I said at one point, even if this was just for him, it would have all been
All
worth
worth
it,
it.
to see how much he has been able to gain that brotherhood that he's always been wanting and seeking without even maybe realizing it.
Yeah,
And imagine how many people like him are out there, um, that never have had anything like this, this brotherhood. And it's so fun to be a part of, Mary. I mean, it's just it's so fun to see to see these men gain this brotherhood. And even for those that have had brotherhood, whether they were in sports or whatever it may be, a lot of guys, they have those things, whether it was like Boy Scouts or rugby, football, soccer, and then we turn 25, we get married, have kids, and all of a sudden, like, you're in this new place, and you
The
just
support system is, yeah.
it's not innate. You have to go out and seek it at that point. Um, Otherwise, you're not going to get it.
And I think about
um,
people like, for example, John, always playing team sports, always having this camaraderie of the team and coming together, and the support system that's created when you have a team of guys. Uh, but oftentimes they don't share these things that really matter to them, that they would never think about sharing with their fellow athletes. By the way,
right,
I had a rough week, and I didn't feel very good about myself. And athletes never share that with each other.
right, right, right. I'm like, I mean, that it happens, right? When you can really have that relationship that's so strong that you feel comfortable to do that, right? But I'd say a majority of men don't have that
Right.
to fall back on. And actually, so one of my favorite parts of the app, there's an anonymous question section, where we have a lot of vulnerability on the main Brotherhood feed, but you go to the anonymous questions, and you are getting, I mean, you just wouldn't believe the questions we're getting.
Mm.
And the reception of them is so beautiful. I mean, we've had so many questions about pornography, about about sex, about being a better father, about just being a better husband. There's all the things that most of us think about, um, or have dealt with or are struggling
Right.
with, and you look at it, and they do it anonymously, probably because they feel alone, and they're the only ones that are doing X, Y, or Z, or they're the only ones that got mad at their kid last night, or they're the only ones,
Yeah.
whatever. And then in the comments, which are not anonymous, you see this like camaraderie, and they're like, just solution support, just this outpouring of support for this man, whoever asked these questions, right? And it's so cool to see, because they might not have had that place in the past, to be able to do those kinds of things.
And I think you remember that day when we spoke together at this teenage suicide event, that I started off my part with talking about when I was in college and my two
Yep.
suicide attempts. And so I'm creating this vulnerability of just ripping open the chest. And
Yeah.
here's this Mary Crafts that everyone sees it now as arrived, you know what I mean? And has the life, and showing that, hey, even now I have a journey, and even now I work through things, and I understand. And when you have that, suddenly there's this opening of the heart to who's ever speaking and to who's in the audience. They see me, they
Yeah.
get me, they understand me. I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. That's a beautiful gift. John, when you were talking, you spoke, and I'm assuming you can share this because you shared it that day, without sharing a name, but you told the story of the impact that this group can have on even someone who never comments and who just listens. Could you share that story today?
Sure. Yeah. Let me pull it up, really, really quickly.
Well,
It's
if you need notes, I can tell it without notes. I was listening so
well,
intently.
yeah. Well, it's more this idea. I have it right here. It's
Okay,
just a message. I like to share it in their own words,
sure.
because it was a message that I got, in a time when I was wondering. Obviously, this was the very beginning. We'd seen some progress. We'd seen men having great experiences, but I think it was in a low moment when I got this message, and it was from somebody that I knew, that I have known for probably a year now, and he came on and joined our app, and he's been a little bit of a lurker, we call
Mm.
them,
Yeah.
right?
No, I
You know,
know.
they're not super engaged, but they, you know, they'll show up
They're
sometimes.
watching.
Um, yes, and they're watching. But here's what he said. He sent me this message. He said, 2 weeks ago, I realized that I had two choices. I could either kill myself and let my life insurance pay off all of my debts, or I could file for bankruptcy. Even though I know only like 5 people in here, I didn't want any of them to think that they had somehow failed me or the movement. So I opted for the latter option. I have skipped all the check ins. And for the listeners, we do on the app every day, we do mental check ins in the morning and in the evening. So that's what he's referring to. He said, I've skipped all of the check ins because I am proud and stubborn, but I've read every one every day. I just wanted you to know that even though you may not think you're accomplished all that much on any given day, you are. I'm here today because of you. This may sound really weird to say, and to be honest, I'm crying as I type this, but I love you, John, for what you do and are. Thank you for being my friend. Um, and man, when I got that, I just lost it. My wife, funny enough, she walked in right as I had just finished reading it, and I was just like weeping,
Yeah.
and she's just like, she kind of like took a step back, was like, okay, I'll leave him alone for a minute. But it was just this powerful moment, and you know, this person, I'm so grateful they shared it with me. And to your point, Mary, um, just opening up about anything, really, any struggles, whether it's suicidal thoughts, whether it is I'm not feeling like I am enough or good enough, or like I'm not a good dad, or all these things that go through my mind. And I know, you know, my wife has similar thoughts. We all do. Um, we all have those thoughts that we're not good enough. But when we express them purposefully, uh, like you said, it opens it up. It opens it up for this invitation to anybody that reads it, hears it, and it gives them permission to do the same thing. That's the only reason I'm able to be vulnerable online. It's because I saw people that I looked up to that shared openly, like, these are successful people.
Right.
You know, these are people that I've looked up to, and they're struggling. You're allowed to be successful and struggle, you know, and you're like, oh, maybe I can do that too, and maybe I can share it and not worry about repercussions on LinkedIn because somebody doesn't think I'm able to work because I have struggled, you know, which is such a silly thing, but that happens. People are
Yeah.
so scared to share because of repercussions of perceptions of their community. And so it's been cool to see um, when people do start to open up on LinkedIn or wherever, and all the reactions that they get out of it and the support. It's just like, why haven't
Amazing.
I been doing this all along?
Yeah.
We're all human, and that vulnerability and sharing breaks down walls. It really does. It totally breaks down walls for connection.
You know,
Um,
I love to believe that that which I was so afraid of sharing is the exact thing that creates the connection between us. And
oof,
that idea
beautiful.
of that we cannot begin to heal what we are still hiding. And the moment that we stop hiding and begin to share and be vulnerable, then we can begin to heal that very moment. People think,
Yes,
okay, well, then if I start sharing and being vulnerable, at some point I can begin to heal. No, it's that very moment when
you've
you
already started.
risk and put it out there, you begin the healing process at that moment.
Hmm,
So, to my
beautiful.
listeners, I would like to encourage you, if you are a guy listening and would love to have a brotherhood, if you are a woman listening and know of a guy who would like to have a brotherhood, that you share this podcast with them and allow them to follow John on LinkedIn and get to know him. All of those links are at the end of the podcast. And I know that you will be as touched by this individual as I am. And some of us get the opportunity to see and be influenced by Christ like people. And some of us, like John, get to walk in those steps. You will not regret any time that you put into a relationship with John Moore. And to that, I hope that people take this podcast and embrace it in their heart and follow this beautiful holiday season. Thanks for being with us, John.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate you.
Crafting a meaningful life.